asked a simple question. If LIV Golf's biggest names wanted to come back, would they bring value to the PGA Tour? Rory paused, then flipped the question around. Had those players even brought value to LIV? That was not a warm invitation. But his next point mattered even more. Rory made it clear that returning now would not be easy. Brooks Koepka used the PGA Tour's limited returning member program earlier this year, but that window closed in February. Bryson DeChambeau, Jon Rahm, and Cameron Smith were eligible. None of them took it, and Rory warned that anyone changing their mind now could face a tough road back. Suddenly, Bryson's position looks very different, and the timing could hardly be worse for LIV. Rory made those comments on August 19th. Just 2 days earlier, LIV canceled its planned team championship in Michigan, bringing the 2026 season to an early finish in Indianapolis. LIV said it wanted to focus its resources on the transition to its next chapter, but that transition is becoming the real story. Saudi Arabia's public investment fund is ending its backing after this season, and LIV is preparing to move forward with new investors. That does not mean the league is disappearing, but it does mean its financial structure is changing, while several star players have decisions to make about 2027. And Bryson may be the most important one of all, because this is no longer just Rory taking another shot at LIV Golf. His warning comes while LIV is trying to prove what its future looks like, and the canceled Michigan event is only the part everyone can see. Behind the scenes, LIV needs money, commitment, and its biggest names to stay. And Bryson may hold far more power than anyone realized. And that is where LIV Golf's situation gets much more complicated, because the league is not simply trying to finish another season. It is trying to figure out what comes next. Saudi Arabia's public investment fund is ending its current financial backing after 2026, and although LIV says a new lead investor is ready to step in, getting that deal across the line is proving far from straightforward. Suddenly, the pressure has moved behind closed doors. LIV CEO Scott O'Neill admitted on August 19th that the organization is working on what he called a very compressed timeline to complete the transaction. But there is another part of this deal that matters even more. The new financing depends heavily on LIV keeping enough of its biggest players committed beyond this season. Without those names, the entire proposition becomes much harder to sell. And that gives Bryson DeChambeau an enormous amount of leverage. He is not just another player collecting a LIV paycheck. Bryson is one of the league's most recognizable faces, one of its biggest personalities, and one of the few players who has consistently defended the product publicly. If LIV is trying to convince investors that its next chapter is worth backing, losing Bryson would be a very difficult place to start. O'Neill knows that too. He has publicly praised Bryson's commitment to LIV and made it clear that he hopes DeChambeau remains part of the league's future. But what Bryson would be committing to may look very different from the LIV Golf he originally joined. Earlier this month, The Guardian reported that the proposed next phase could feature fewer core events, smaller tournament purses, and more player equity. The money may still be significant, but the structure is changing underneath him. That completely flips the relationship. When Bryson first joined LIV, the league had the leverage. It could offer enormous guarantees, huge purses, and security that the PGA Tour simply could not match. Now LIV needs its stars to commit at exactly the moment those stars have the most reason to ask questions, and Bryson may have more negotiating power than ever, which might make walking away sound simple. Except there is one major problem. Earlier this year, Bryson already had access to something that could have changed his entire situation, a direct path back to the PGA Tour, and he let the deadline pass. And this is where Bryson DeChambeau's situation becomes much more complicated, because earlier this year, the PGA Tour actually gave him a way back. In January, the tour created something called the Returning Member Program, but this was not an open invitation for every player who had left for LIV Golf. It was a very small door, and Bryson was one of the few players allowed to walk through it. The problem is, that door would not stay open for long. To qualify, a player had to meet strict criteria, including winning the Players or a major championship between 2022 and 2025, along with other membership requirements. That left only a handful of LIV stars eligible. Bryson qualified because of his 2024 US Open victory. Jon Rahm and Cameron Smith were also eligible. And then Brooks Koepka made the decision that suddenly changed the entire conversation. He took the deal. Koepka used the program to return to the PGA Tour for the 2026 season, But everyone else had very little time to decide. Applications opened on January 12th and closed on February 2nd. The PGA Tour made it clear this was a one-time, defined window applying only to 2026. Bryson did not use it before the deadline expired, and at the time, that decision probably did not look nearly as dangerous as it does now. Bryson was still one of Livy's loudest supporters. The season was ahead of him, the league still had its biggest names, and there was no reason to assume he needed an immediate escape route. More importantly, not using the program did not mean Bryson permanently rejected PGA Tour membership. He simply chose not to use this specific temporary pathway. But then the situation around LIV began changing fast. PIF funding is ending after this season. Events have been canceled. LIV is still trying to complete its transition to new investment, and those investors need confidence that the league's biggest players will remain committed. Suddenly, a decision Bryson made in February is carrying much more weight in August. The safety net everyone might assume was there no longer exists in the same form, because this is where Rory McIlroy's warning becomes brutal. That old deal has not simply been left sitting on the table waiting for Bryson to change his mind. And according to Rory, whatever comes next could be considerably harder. And this is where Rory McIlroy's warning becomes brutal. Because the returning member program was never designed to sit there forever while Levy players decided what they wanted to do. Brooks Koepka took the opportunity. Bryson DeChambeau did not. And according to Rory, that particular deal has now come and gone. What replaces it could be much harder. McIlroy said he was pretty certain that any additional LIV players looking to return would not simply be welcomed straight back onto the PGA Tour. There could eventually be another pathway, but Rory believes the terms would not be as favorable as the ones offered earlier this year. That distinction matters, because even the so-called favorable deal came with an enormous price. Just look at Brooks Koepka. He returned through the special program, but Reuters reported that doing so meant forfeiting 5 years of potential PGA Tour equity. Depending on his performance and the growth of the tour, that was estimated to be worth somewhere between $50 million and $85 million. So Koepka got back in, but he certainly did not walk back through the door without consequences, and Bryson could face an even steeper price. That is the uncomfortable reality surrounding him now. LIV Golf is entering a major transition. Bryson has not confirmed what comes after 2026, and the clearest PGA Tour pathway available to him has already expired. None of that means Bryson cannot ever return, but it does mean the negotiating position he had in February may no longer exist, and Rory seemed perfectly happy to point that out. Then came another shot. When Rory was asked whether returning LEV players could add value to the PGA Tour, he turned the question around. Had they even added value to LIV? It was a short answer, but the message underneath it was obvious. Rory believes the PGA Tour is already in a strong position. It does not need to chase players back at any cost, and that changes who holds the leverage. A few years ago, live stars could look at the PGA Tour and know another league was willing to spend enormous money to get them. Now Bryson is looking at two very different futures. Staying means committing to a LIV golf that is changing around him. Leaving could mean trying to negotiate his way back under terms that Rory believes will only get tougher. And suddenly, whichever direction Bryson chooses comes with a major compromise. And that leaves Bryson DeChambeau at a crossroads that looked almost impossible a few years ago. He has not announced that he is leaving LIV Golf, and there is no guarantee he will. In fact, Bryson has remained one of the league's strongest public supporters. But for the first time, staying is no longer the only obvious path in front of him, and each option now comes with a completely different kind of risk. Option 1 is simple. Bryson stays with Livy and becomes even more important to whatever the league looks like next. Livy needs major stars committed beyond 2026 while it works through its new investment structure, and Bryson is exactly the kind of name investors would want attached to that future. If other top players move on, his importance could grow even further. But that would also mean committing himself to a league that is still changing around him. Option 2 is trying to find a way back to the PGA Tour. The problem is that the easiest documented route has already disappeared. The February returning member program is closed,